You may have recognized me. I was on stage with Chris Roberts. Pretty exciting times. I've heard from a few people, it's not every day you would expect to have somebody like myself from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. That has been my job for the last couple of years, is to change that perception. A little bit about myself before I get into my presentation. My name is Terry Shearhart. I am a career intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I am part of our cybersecurity investigative team out of Toronto. I'm joined today by my supervisor, Akina. She's not going to be presenting or whatnot, but she is in attendance here alongside me today. I will be doing all of the presentation. I have nearly 20 years of experience as a professional intelligence officer. The vast majority of that was working in the shadows, doing our traditional covert work. I am not a professional speaker. I am trying to get better and better at it. This isn't my my comfort zone, speaking in front of groups, but I have been getting more and more in front of big audiences over the last couple of years. During that experience, I've predominantly been focused my career on counterintelligence works. Essentially, that is hunting other foreign spies operating in Canada. So I've taken that knowledge and experience gained from our traditional counterintelligence, Chinese, Russian threat actors. How many people here have read the 2023 CSIS public report that dropped, 4 days ago? Got one? Okay. So a lot of what we're talking about is taking from our classified environment and providing information into the public space. So the unclassified threat intelligence. If you attended some of the sessions this morning, they were talking about the importance of threat intelligence feeds. We feed into the larger picture, as well as your commercial cybersecurity companies, in augmenting threat intelligence out to critical infrastructure, our provincial and municipal government partners. And that's sort of where this presentation comes from, is over the next few minutes, I'm going to briefly introduce you to our world at the service. So the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, otherwise known colloquially as the service. Okay, so if you hear me referring to the service, that's the organization that I'm part of, that I'm referring to. Now, in my role on the cyber desk, the reason why I'm out here today and out within the community, I lead our strategic partnership and engagement efforts on the public-facing side of it. I am here building bridges with our critical infrastructure partners, provincial and municipal government partners as well, trying to increase collectively threat intelligence sharing so that we can collectively increase everyone's cyber resiliency. We're all facing some of these same big threat actors. I'm going to get into that a little bit in my presentation. Once I get through a little introduction of what it is we do, because we are just one of a few. So my presentation goals is to sensitize you to our threats. Our investigations are threats to national security. So I just simply refer to them as the threats. In the cyber realm, you'll see who some of those threat actors are. I'm going to speak and specifically identify some of those threat actors and what specifically and strategically they're doing and why we should all be concerned about them. My goal, our goal in these speakings and these presentations is to sensitize you to the threats as we see them, threats to national security, to allow you to go back to your organizations that you represent and increase your risk decision-making that's appropriate for your organization and your group. We're not here to provide advice. We don't do incident response and mitigation. Those are some of our other government partners, and I'll get into that very shortly. Traditionally, this presentation is very heavily focused on the actual threats, the threat actors. I'm going to touch upon that a little bit today, but my focus is more broadly to speak about the geopolitical environment and why we need to be somewhat concerned about it as part of cybersecurity professionals. This is the latest quote. If you have read the report, if you haven't, this is a little sampler of it. But I want to start by quoting MI5 director So MI5, for those of you who aren't familiar with the intelligence and security community, is the domestic intelligence and security agency for the UK government. So Director General Ken McCallum at a recent Emerging Technology and Security Innovation Security Summit, that's a mouthful, at Stanford University was saying, if you are anywhere close to the cutting edge of technology, you might not be interested in geopolitics, okay? But rest assured, geopolitical actors are interested in you. That applies to us here in Canada and those of you in this room. This message was further amplified, if you will, on April the 29th. My boss, the director of the service, David Vigneault, appeared before a parliamentary special committee on Canada, People's Republic of China relationship. Okay, it's one of these many parliamentary subcommittees. So he was speaking to this group, and I just want to quote him, and I also have to preface something for other professional speakers. I have to rely on my notes. Why? Because I have a swirling mass of classified intelligence, and there's a really sharp line in the cyber realm of the unclassified stuff, and I don't want to get arrested by any of these ladies in this row for violating the Security of Information Act by inadvertently disclosing classified information. So sometimes you're going to see me referring to notes because we, in an effort to put information out there, we're skating a very thin line. So, according to our director, there's concerted efforts to steal cutting-edge Canadian technology at a mind-boggling level, okay? This was his words. And this effort to steal this tech is specifically designed and built by the People's Liberation Army to build it as a formidable force, okay? So there's concerted efforts by the People's Republic of China to steal Canadian technology to advance their military program is essentially what's happening here. Why? To build it as a force that's formidable against Western interests. Like Canada, common Western democratic societies that value diversity, equity, inclusion, all of these fundamental freedoms that Western democracies love, cherish, and the foundation of what it is as a country. Countries like China are building their forces, their cyber armies, and their conventional military to counter all of our efforts. This was the message that he was putting out there. This has been a concerted and prolific effort since 2012. Essentially, that was Xi Jinping when he became president of the PRC, so the People's Republic of China. That was a concerted strategic plan that bridges 10, 15, 20 years of strategic planning, far surpassing our traditional 2 to 4 year strategic planning at best in Western democracies, right? This is some of the challenges that we face. Canada and other wealthy Western countries have been the target of PRC threat actions to obtain our high technology. No surprise. We've heard this time and time again. We are here to basically highlight this. More and more, we see those threat entities, such as the PRC hacking groups, not just going after traditional governments and trying to get our classified secrets that are housed in our databases and our systems and other government departments, but they're also going after the private sector, everyone in this room, okay? We're going to speak a little bit more about that. Academia, if you are IT within higher education, K to 12, these are all viable targets that they're going after because there's value in the data and information. They are simply trying to acquire that information, that data. Why? In order to pursue their strategic global ambitions, because we have a lot of smart people, creative ideas, advancing technology and all that sort of stuff. They don't have to invest in it if they can steal it. That's to set the stage of the geopolitics a little bit of what we're going to get into. So right now I want to sort of highlight a little bit about our organization and how we work. We have a unique mandate when it comes to cybersecurity. We are one, can't emphasize this enough, one of many federal government partners. I've got my RCMP counterparts in the office, or in the room. I know CSIS, the Canadian Cyber Center. They are part of participating in the Career Expo. They are critical partners for incident response and mitigation. We've got the communication security establishment, who are our signals intelligence folks. We all work together representing the Government of Canada, but from a whole of government, that also extends to our provincial law enforcement partners, the Ontario Cyber Centre in the province of Ontario, others across the country. So very much as a whole host of partners that are out there to counter these really sophisticated and serious state threats that we look at from a national security perspective. We have, and what we all try to do is align ourselves with our unique mandates, our legal abilities, and our specific capabilities and skill sets. We are a human agency at our foundation. We recruit people who have access to information or creative ideas to assist us completing our investigations into the threat activities. Much like your IT departments who are trying to get at the TTPs, the initial access, attributions, all those sort of stuff that you're doing at the micro level within your organizations, we're doing at the macro level to be able to feed back down in. So your insights at the micro level can impact and inform us on the large scale, okay? So that's some of the importance of collaboration and information sharing. So we have people, we have footprints across the country, and we have sophisticated technical capabilities that augment some of the technical capabilities of our SIGINT agencies and our law enforcement partners. But we have unique ones ourselves, and we're all trying to align those to effectively reduce the threat and work as a Team Canada. Often we talk about a whole of government. I scrap the whole of government approach. At a presentation like this, it's about Team Canada, okay? I love the fact we started with a national anthem. This is one of the things that we need to do better in Canada is come together as a community. CyberX has done a tremendous job of building a community. That's what we are going to take if we're going to be successful against our threat actors. So a little bit, our unique mandate, whole of government, I prefer Team Canada. We are predominantly focused, our investigations in the cyber realm, so threats to national security, terrorism, espionage, and sabotage. In the cyber realm, we specifically and predominantly are focused on cyber espionage and cyber sabotage. Cyber sabotage is probably the preeminent one that keeps me up at night and gives me anxiety. If you attended the wastewater tabletop exercise, threats to OT, if the power goes out, the water is poisoned, telecommunications go down, ransomware is disruptive. Anywhere from 3 days to a week to get back up and running, maybe a couple months. Yeah, it's expensive. It costs $17 million if you were to pay the ransomware, or $13 million maybe for all your incident response and mitigation to get back up and running. Catastrophic failure of our critical infrastructure will have massive impacts that far exceed, I think, some of our abilities to even comprehend. So that is what keeps me up at night, and is our focus of our cyber investigations is the persistent threats from hostile states on cyber sabotage, okay? You're most likely, if you're going to be hit by a threat actor, ransomware is, by volume, is likely to be the most prevalent threat we face, but cyber sabotage, I argue, is probably the most severe threat that we face from an existential perspective from the two big threat actors that I'll get to shortly here. So again, as I mentioned, we seek to collect and report on intelligence. So like the threat intelligence model, our primary mandate was to inform government. If anyone follows politics and stuff like that, you may have heard of Bill C-70 that just dropped. That's a legal instrument that, if passed, will better enable us to provide and be legally mandated to provide information to you guys if you're in critical infrastructure, if you're part of municipal government or provincial government. Right now, we're legally not set up and designed specifically to inform those partners. That will enable us to inform not just the federal government, but our community better. We, in the interim, have done steps through threat reduction to unclassify information to keep you informed, because we can't wait. It's vital that if we have critical pieces of threat intelligence that we suspect that you're a victim and you don't know that your systems are compromised, that we have a mechanism in place to get that information. Our partners and ourselves are working really well. We want to get better at it, so that's what Bill C-70 is about for that. Attribution, trying to determine the intent, who they're targeting, the methodologies, all of that to provide those threat intelligence briefings. If you've ever received a CISA or CSIS threat alert, we all feed into that product. Nice little executive summary, all your indicators of compromise, what target groups that they're targeting so that you can make all of those informed decision-making. That's the day-to-day stuff that we're doing. So collection, but also the second part of it is to take novel and creative ways to reduce the threat. That one is a work in progress, and I'm hoping to get some help from some of you folks to assist us in how we can maybe explore novel ways to leverage some of our capabilities and our legal frameworks to reduce the threat that some of the adversaries pose. So that's the final point. Take measures to reduce these threats. It's very wide open. Our legislation says take measures to do that so long as you don't kill somebody or violate their sexual integrity. If there's creative people in the room, I think that gives us a lot of wiggle room for some creative ways that we can consider possibly looking at trying to reduce these threats. Resulting in enhanced cyber resiliency of your organizations, both as an individual. I like to think of it as a sector. If we all do our parts individually, we'll increase the resiliency of this Canadian sector, whatever sector it is you work on, so that that threat actor will look at a different country's sector rather than us because they are targets of opportunity. We've raised our cyber maturity just from the most infantile will be a huge step. So trying to work with groups and stuff. So if you fall within any of these 10 sectors, food sector, the water, these are the 10 critical infrastructure sectors as determined by public safety. If you fall within any of these, I'm here to work with you, okay? That's part of my job. Ransomware first became a concern to us in 2021 as a result of the Colonial Pipelines. Honestly, ransomware has fallen off our priorities a little bit now. It's so prevalent in the community. It's still very much a criminal aspect. But these are our top sort of threat groups that we're looking at. The top two, the existential threats. So we have to prioritize because of limited resources, right? We're all under a resource crunch. Who would like to have twice as many employees in their IT security department? Every department, whoever you talk to, government, private sector, we're all going to say the same thing, and we want double the budget. So we have to be very efficient at what we do. Our primary concerns are the state-sponsored Chinese threat actors. I highlight here APT Typhoon Volt, or Volt Typhoon, I should say, as the preeminent one. This is the one. How many people have heard of Volt Typhoon? How many people are sick of hearing about Volt Typhoon? Well, if they decide to actually go kinetic, we need to be concerned. Our counterparts in the FBI have been very outspoken about the threats posed. We are all working together at the international community of the security intelligence to reduce the threat through various means. We're here to tell you that this threat is real, and if we want to talk about threats to critical infrastructure, this is at the top of my list. Right now, geopolitically, it's a question of whether their government wants to make that decision to cripple us and how successful they will be in their attacks. Yeah.
Do we understand why these groups target Canada specifically?
Yep, I'll get to that shortly. And it's short answer, geopolitics. Okay. Second one is the Russian Federation's state-sponsored activities. I highlight here Midnight Blizzard, also known as APT 28. If you attended the threat intelligence briefing, it was raised by one of the speakers there. If you were talking to me, if I was doing this presentation 8 months ago, I probably had that at the top of the list because, and as you'll see in one of the slides, they're the ones that have actually reached out and touched us. They are the ones that have aggressively been deploying cyber sabotage, technical operations prolifically in support of their conventional warfare in the Ukraine, okay? To answer this question, these operations are, when we talk about cyber sabotage, it's different than cyber espionage. Cyber espionage, like traditional espionage, is widely accepted as part of being international players. It's an unpleasant reality It happens. We all don't like it to happen to us, but we all know that everyone's engaged in it. We're doing it. They're doing it to us. And it's, quietly, we deal with that in the shadows. Cyber sabotage, it has been clearly indicated by the US administration. If any one of these two countries was to conduct cyber sabotage against critical infrastructure, that's considered an act of war and will be retaliated in kind. So what we believe is happening is these countries see cyber sabotage as tools of asymmetric warfare, okay? If you want to achieve a strategic or conventional objective, success in the Ukraine, success in invading Taiwan, their biggest threats are Western democracies coming to the defense of these countries that on their own wouldn't be able to defend against such existential conventional threats. However, if the US and Canada is reeling because of an internal cyber sabotage on our critical infrastructure, we now are diverting our efforts and energy domestically, internally, and don't have as much capacity abroad to defend our allies that are under significant threat. So this is why we're so concerned, is that if the Chinese government makes the decision that it wants to invade Taiwan because it's learned from all of Russia's failures in the Ukraine, that it will be either preceded or simultaneously conducted with cyber sabotage attacks on the West to weaken our capabilities to defend. What now happens, we talk about attribution, right? If one of their state-level actors attacks, military consequences. What happens, though, if a Russian-language cyber criminal group such as Killnet, Zarya Group, these cyber mercenaries, right? The IT security professionals of the host countries that are not state actors, they're just a bunch of people like us who are loyal to the country that has provided them safe haven, maybe some finance, maybe some subtle direction, and a bunch of criminals conduct a same sort of cyber sabotage attack on a Canadian entity or a US entity. How can we retaliate militaristically or even significantly against a criminal element? So from an attribution standpoint, geopolitically, groups such as cyber avengers that represent the Islamic Republic of Iran and these state-aligned actors, and that's what we refer to them. Our threat investigations, we refer to these people as state-aligned. They align their ideology and their strategy, their targeting, and their intent with that of the host state that they reside under for safe haven and loyalty. So this is where Killnet, Zarya, we're concerned about them because we see them, they were active in the Ukraine, and we're seeing their activity targeting Canadian entities. Also, same type of sophisticated cyber sabotage technology and capabilities. You're seeing that sharing of tooling because the state is getting its tooling from the InfoSec communities. So, the Chinese program's advancing from its InfoSec. The Russians, it came out during the NTC Vulcan leaks, right? The tooling that was specifically examined by Mandiant and Google and stuff like that revealed that it was intentionally developed to enable them to target our transportation and our energy sectors of Western countries. Well, if you're developing special tools for that, you definitely have a desire to want to use it, right? We're seeing that capability. So folks that are both doing operationally aggressive activities, they're also the ones that are developing the tooling that's supporting the state actors. It's very analogous to what we have here. They just leverage it in a much different way, right? A little bit more about the geopolitical nature of the threat, and this is where I have to refer to my notes a little bit. I just want to expand a little bit on how we see, and again, this is through the optics of our national security investigations and where we see the threats. From a PRC state-sponsored operations, their intent or their goal, covertly collect information on all aspects of Western government and nonprofit, industry, innovation, technology, critical infrastructure. How many people here are in industry? How many people here consider themselves in innovation the companies they work for? How many people here consider themselves part of technology? You software developers, work in IT security, or work in critical infrastructure, right? So these are all areas where they want to gain as much understanding. Oh, sorry, and telecommunication and research, big ones, okay? Why? They want to know our systems better than we know them, because that's how they develop they discover the vulnerabilities in our systems, because they know them better than we know them to even be able to defend them. The objective to advance their geopolitical, economic, and technological interests. All right, we sort of talked about that. Canada, from our investigations, is a high-level priority target for their cyber operations. Is that a surprise to anybody? Is anybody here going, oh my God, we don't think that they've ever wanted to target us? Okay, so not overly groundbreaking, but I'm constantly, and one of the things that we need to overcome is a Canadian naivety, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but it's a vulnerability. We talk about the technical CVEs and the vulnerabilities we have in our software and our systems, but all too often, I'm talking to people in IT security, I'm talking to people at the C-suite about the threats, and they're like, why do I need to care about this? Why are they interested in me? This is why. I'm here to tell you they're interested in us, okay? That's just part of the benefits of being Canadian. Right? We don't see ourselves as a threat, so why would they target us? Well, because we're good. We're good at what we do. We're nice. That's a bit of a vulnerability. Strengths and weaknesses, right? Sometimes the strength is sometimes our weakness. The Russian Federation is much the same, although it is a little bit more to acquire technology to improve both its economic and military position, as well to advance foreign intelligence collection. They're a little bit more tactical. One of the analogies, if you've attended conferences and stuff like this, the way we basically differentiate these two significant, and the terminology that I will use is existential threats to our society, and it's not just Canadian society, but Western democracies, is the Russian Federation is the hurricane, okay? Comes in, it's very loud, noisy, and highly destructive, and then it passes. The Chinese threat is more to like climate change. It's subtle, it's persistent, and ongoing. Is that a...
I want to know what is your opinion about Pegasus project?
Sorry, my opinion in which?
Pegasus project that governments use.
Yep. So that was another key area. So our investigations, and one of the things I didn't get into today because we weren't so much on the threats, was we also look at some of the non-government. So the emerging technology that certain companies, so commercial cybersecurity companies in other countries are developing technology and capabilities that enable other mid to low level states to acquire more sophisticated, mature, comparable systems to, say, our Five Eyes security intelligence. So a lot of the countries that employ the Pegasus software, there was a lot of human rights concerns. So a lot of the countries that were employing that technology, again, that was contrary to our fundamental geopolitical beliefs, is that they're targeting political dissidents. They're targeting all of those folks that often Canada will welcome as a safe haven. So if they are in Canada and they're being targeted because they have a difference in political opinion, a religious belief, a lifestyle belief, and they're being persecuted by foreign governments deploying that kind of software, that is a threat to national security. That is traditional cyber espionage, so that falls under the slightly lower elevated severity of cyber espionage. However, in that case, there's that nuance that the consequences, the repercussions of those individuals being persecuted is a threat to life often, right? So there is that severity that we would treat that type of investigation. So yes, that can absolutely constitute under the broader cyber espionage threats to national security in certain perspectives. All right. So again, we talked a little bit about this. While they have a sophisticated level, and I've heard this, I think today and in other presentations, We are targeted because we're targets of opportunity. Traditionally, corporations and entities have not invested in its people, that we're all here, our teams, we suffer, and we haven't invested enough in the infrastructure. So we're merely targets of opportunity. These sophisticated states don't have to deploy their most sophisticated 0 days and other high tech. They can simply use commercially off-the-shelf available tools, or we refer to as COTS, often developed by the InfoSec communities of those state-aligned groups, to exploit our vulnerabilities, IT and OT, okay? Traditional espionage and ransomware continue to pose a real threat, but as I mentioned, the threats to operational technology from a cyber sabotage, that's my preeminent concern that keeps me up at night. Geopolitically, okay? The impacts and connections of geopolitics and cybersecurity have become more and more evident in significant years as the digital environment has transformed the nature and conduct of warfare, espionage, diplomacy, and trade. I'm not here to say we're at war. I talk to many colleagues in other departments, and they feel like we're under attack and we're in a war. I'm not going to say that, okay? This is not a declaration of war. I don't want to exaggerate the threat. But from a geopolitical perspective, we're seeing regional warfare occurring. The Ukraine, we talked about, right? Russia-Ukrainian conflict. Hamas-Israel conflict. You've got the PRC's desire to invade and take control of Taiwan. We have these warfare activities, these geopolitical hotspots regionally around the world. As a result, typically the government of Canada gets involved, right? Rightfully or wrongfully, we typically will take a stance on one side of the conflict or another. As a result, Canadian entities become viable targets by the other side that we're not supporting, okay? Cyber-enabled operations are extensions of war in regional conflicts, and they are extensions of that geopolitical environment that's going on. So as an unfortunate reality, any and all Canadian interests, we talked about the big two, but as you look at some of these smaller regional conflicts, you know, wastewater and water found themselves the target of the Iranian cyber avengers merely because some places had Israeli technology in their infrastructure. And as a result, those cyber operators, if you will, the threat actors loyal to the Iranian and Hamas side of that conflict, said, well, you guys are all then viable targets because you support Israel simply by having Israeli developed technology. So that in and of itself, it's geopolitical, and we may not have even thought about that while we're employing our systems. So as we have a global economy, and I'd love to support Canadian first investment in Canadian products, but the reality is, from a supply chain, there's often very specific, specialized, unique supply chains that come from outside of Canada. So when we talk about SBOM and stuff like that, it's one thing to know the code, but also to understand the geopolitical implications that it could pose to your organization from a supply chain and what products you use, what software, what hardware, because somebody else may be offended. Right? It's not really fair, but life's not fair. We're here to speak about realities, and that's sort of the sober discussion points. Sorry, got a little sidetracked there. Wars are physical in the cyber realm, so I don't want to overemphasize the war component, but the cyber operations is an extension of a tool that we're seeing more and more commonly used by state and the cyber actors, the various anonymouses, if you will, in support of different state areas, are being used and employed more and more. There's less resistance to deploying these very harmful and disruptive cyber capabilities targeting Canadian entities. This is our new reality that we have to come to grasp with and work as a community to thwart. Throughout 2023, malicious cyber activity targeting Canada will continue to increase. We don't see the geopolitical environment cooling off anytime soon. The reality is we're more likely than not going to see it maybe increase slightly over the coming year. So this threat is not going away in the short term, unfortunately. So we need to be aware, not to be this isn't the sky's falling, but we just need to have an awareness and an honest understanding of the world that we're operating in. Again, that Canadian naivety, we have to erode that a little bit in the realities of where we are in the world and what it means for us. Complexity is going to increase in the scale. It's going to require us to do better. When I talk about a whole community, this is where we all have to come together. We need to do better collectively, not just from a whole government, but as a community of professionals in cybersecurity. I am out here, no idea is too off the wall for us to have discussions. It may not be implemented, but there's a lot of brain power in our community. I have a specific 20-year bias on doing intelligence operations and stuff like that. I don't think the way everyone else does. You may very well have some good solutions that we can explore on how to employ as a community to do better, to align ourselves, to counter the realities of some of the threats that we have. We have to be in this together. Information warfare, that's the last component. We talked about sabotage and espionage. A component of the espionage that we have to really be cognizant of. We look at it from threats to our fundamental institutions of significance. Our media, social media, and its impacts and influence over our political decisions, our religious decisions. Going back to a divided and weak country focuses us to focus internally, weakens us externally. We know that the Russians, for example, the Russian government, sorry, I want to be always clear, when I'm talking about this, it's not the people, it's the state entities and the state employees, okay? The Russian Federation in its cyber operations are very, very, very good. They went from their decades and decades of influence operations through traditional espionage, like talking to people, and they were able to convert that 10 years ago into the social media space and influence the population to do things that we wouldn't normally have done because they're very sophisticated at hiding the message. They find those points that divide us as a society. They're not creating those divisive points. They're simply adding fuel to that fire so that we continue to divide ourselves. And as we're divided as a country and as a community, we're fighting each other rather than enabling our abilities to fight the existential external threats. So as we move into election cycles in the States, as we move into upcoming elections in 2025 or sooner, we need to be aware of the role of social media in some of these platforms. The algorithms are very sophisticated. They have great content and great programs. The problem is the covert and subtle abilities of the Chinese government and the Russian government to weaponize these platforms from an information warfare perspective to keep us divided, to keep us infighting. So it's our job as a government to try to thwart and weed out that because it's too sophisticated. As a citizen, you're not necessarily going to be able to identify it. Like, even the best of us can fall victim to some of those rabbit holes of 3 hours of TikTok and Instagram, and you're like, how the heck did I end up on whatever stuff that I'm getting, right? And you don't realize it until sometimes you're in it, and in the worst case, sometimes it's too late. You've gone over some sort of threshold. It's caused you to say something online and whatnot that we can't sometimes take back. We just have to be aware of it. That's all I want to say from that point, is that there is a threat from these existential threats to our Western fundamental, like those things that we hold near and dear, they want to erode and destroy to advance themselves on the global stage. The last sort of, current geopolitical tensions, regional conflicts, incentives are up to use it more. This is a threat, a slide just to highlight the quick emergence. So I just want to take 30 seconds to highlight. A year ago, we were looking at the threats to operational technology. This was what I was beating my drum about. The Russian Federation early on through its Russian conflict in February and March. In March of 2023, that was our first confirmed case in Canada where a threat actor had compromised a Canadian gas company, and some bad things almost happened, but thankfully, through team efforts, that was narrowly avoided. But it was a confirmed attack on critical infrastructure, operational technology. The threat became real, went from theoretical and a regional thing to a reality in Canada. Then by April and May of last year, and continuing persistent to this date, is when we saw the shift to being Volt Typhoon being the more preeminent threat. That was as a result of the geopolitical rhetoric and basically the efforts of our security intelligence community making it more publicly aware. And we became to discover we knew the threat was there, but we discovered that it was more significant and more rampant than we were initially thought. And the decisions were made, this has to be outed. So one of the ways that we reduce the threat is by putting words out there. The Americans took the lead, speaking in Congress. The director of the FBI was very open about some of the ways that the security intelligence community was actively trying to reduce the threat through some of our technical capabilities to clean our SOHO network. So if you're familiar with the Volt Typhoon, one of the things they love to do is living off the land makes it extremely difficult for detection, right? We've heard of this before. But their pre-staging was the exploitation of botnets to compromise end-of-life SOHO networks. So you're doing all of this to protect your enterprise level, but then at that SME and levels of smaller groups out there, there's all these old, archaic, outdated routers and stuff. Again, our adversaries are very smart. They're very capable. As we defend our individual and increase our cyber maturity, they are constantly looking for that next big win. Living off the land and the compromise of SOHO routers. So the FBI used some very cool technical capabilities to essentially cleanse this infection. So that was just I get into this a little bit more about the CVEs and some of the tooling in my other presentations, but from a geopolitical perspective, it just sort of bookends the significance of the threat.
Sorry, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I see you have both Typhoon and Quasar as a threat. What about Spider? So the threat actor behind the breach,
Yeah.
who was actively trying to...
So from our perspective, right, so we have a very narrow mandate of threats to national security. From our perspective, Scattered Spider doesn't elevate itself to the threat to national security that we see others because it's primarily a cyber criminal element, financially motivated, with no necessary, or from our perspective, we are not aware of definitive alignment with state strategic objectives in the conduct of cyber sabotage or cyber espionage. Now, if you have information as it develops, that's not to say that other federal partners aren't looking at Scattered Spider, but from our perspective, we have a very narrow mandate. We do certain things really well. Other partners cover off that. So this is that whole of government where we have certain limitations. When our other partners, they run up to certain limits, often ours then extend, enable the government to collect and do other things as long as we're working collaboratively, we do that. So we do occasionally might collect stuff on that, but we'll share it. That's part of the community, right? That information is valuable to others, so that gets shared, but that's not something that we focus on.
There are some threat attackers behind some wall that they reveal some disinformation for propaganda of the other governments, or they attack some, for example, famous industries or famous activities or these things. Do you have any resolution for these things Canadian government? Because I have seen a lot of activism or a lot of people suffer from these things.
Yep.
For example, in the Twitter, in the TikTok, or on the Instagram. that the government plays role for
So this is the importance of partnerships within communities. Sometimes we're just not aware of it. So maybe we need to have an offline discussion about what you're seeing. If it's not of interest to my organization, I can definitely share that sort of information with other partners, whether it be provincial or federal, that may fall as an interest. But there's a lot of threats out there. We can't do all of them, but we definitely have an interest in knowing about stuff.
So how should we get the source of intel from your side? Is there any platform that we can connect to? Talking,
Right.
we're a security service provider. We see all these IOCs.
Yep.
We want to use the feed from any sources basically, and we haven't been successful to get any information from CC.
Triple CS, yep.
Yes. CCCS.
You haven't been able to get information to them or from them?
From them.
Yeah.
And even to them, we're not aware of any platforms.
Right.
From them is only available through the website from what we have found out.
Yep.
It's not like a feed that we can connect to, get the IOCs
Right.
directly.
They have a number of automated, so they do have subscription services where you can get on and they push out threat alerts, threat advisories, and various threat intelligence that they do put out to industry. So you can go to their website and subscribe to that. They are essentially the government agency that's best to do that. They also have online portals to receive, and then they can connect with MISPs to receive information. Because they're broad collection, and they're collecting on a lot of information sources. We do it uniquely. When we're looking at the state level actors, we have to look at non-technical solutions to increase the security of the communications. I don't want to rely on those electronic means of communication. So it's picking up the phone and establishing contact with us, and we do in-person discussions. If you have information, we can collect it electronically from you through like USB drives and stuff like that, so that information is not being exchanged over telecommunications that could potentially be intercepted by our type of severe adversaries. So everyone can start, if they want to reach us, that's my email, our unit's email address, tocyber@smtp.gc.ca. Myself I monitor the box, and I'm the person that typically will follow up on public engagement for these type of perspectives. So whether you think you have a lead that would be of interest to us, that has that state nexus, that information warfare, cyber espionage, cyber sabotage, that's the email that you can reach us at, and then I will either call you by my phone number or my work email address, and to set up an in-person meeting where we can discuss and follow up with next steps.
Just to follow up, with the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, and what you want to subscribe to is called NCTNS, the National Security Threat Notification System. And you have to basically contact us and subscribe specifically for those threat cases.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for that. So I just want to finish off that given the evolving geopolitical environment and the increased threats, as I've alluded to, we're working to improve our information sharing. We're hoping Bill C-70 will help with that, but we're always looking to do more. We understand that there's a huge appetite, and we do have certain limitations, especially given the sensitivity of a lot of the information we have. So there's a balancing act of getting information. I would like to think if we had specific usable indicators of compromise that led us to suspect, or our other partners that lead us to suspect that your specific organization had a compromise, that information I typically see, we reach out and contact you, whether it's a direct contact from our partners at Triple CS, or if the threat is significant enough, we work in collaboration with one another. We have really seamless, at the national level, communications on this, where the determination is we have such a significant threat that somebody from our office will reach out to have an in-person discussion with you to provide you that information, so we're not potentially tipping off the adversary that may be on your Azure system and enterprise VoIP system. We need to do better as a whole of government, and we all are striving to do that, okay? But from a Team Canada perspective, I want to leave it with this. one of the presenters this morning at the threat intel presentation was talking about how our adversaries are really good, the state level, at leveraging its IT community. I want to do better. I'm here today. I've been out in the community to develop partnerships with entities to increase your cyber resiliency, but I'm here today to say that you may have a solution. You may have ideas of how we can do things differently. My door, my email is open. I am always available for a coffee to discuss these ideas. I think this is where Canada needs to go, to expand from a whole of government to a whole of Team Canada and leverage this community better, to come together collaboratively, to come up with ideas and implement threat reduction initiatives that our organization can leverage. We have certain capabilities that if you're willing to work with us, and it's we can't be as loose and as liberal as some of our adversaries, but I think we can steal some of what they do and the lessons we're learning from how they're really effective in leveraging their community of professionals to advance them, that we can do that to defend ourselves better. So that's my pitch for everyone today is we're here to help, but I think everyone here can also potentially be of assistance to us as we try to reduce these existential threats. So thank you. Thank you for coming out.